Well, thank you for coming out this evening, everyone. My name is Kate Snyder with Piper and Gold. We are working with the team on the Village of Okemos project, and we're very happy to have you here tonight. I appreciate your patience while we fought with technology for a moment, but it appears to be resolved, which means you get to see all the big, pretty pictures, which we hope will be worth the wait for you. So I'm going to go over a couple of housekeeping and formatting things for tonight before we dive into things, and then I'll let you get to hear the stuff that you really want to hear. So you'll notice at some of the tables throughout, if you don't have one, just kind of tap the shoulder of the table next to you and ask them to pass you an extra copy. We do have some agendas for this evening. We also put some sign-in sheets by the door and on some of the tables, and I'll pass those around. The purpose of those are if you would like to receive email updates after this meeting, one of the things we'll do is email out the questions that were asked. And the written answers to those questions. So if you want to make sure that you get those answers, just make sure you get your email written down on one of those forms before you leave. So our plan for tonight, we're going to have 3 different sections. You're welcome at any point throughout to order food, to order drinks. Don't feel like this has to be super formal. But the first portion is Will and Robert are going to share with you even a more updated version for those of you that were at the Indian Hills or Cedar Bend Heights Neighborhood Association meetings a couple of weeks ago. We actually have even more up-to-date information since then. So they're going to share with you some of the updated plans, renderings, all of that kind of stuff, including the information that was shared as a concept plan with the Board of Trustees for a potential development project at the corners of Okemos and Hamilton Roads. And then Genty is going to share a little bit with you about something I know that you're all very interested in, which is traffic and the traffic study that was done and some of the anticipated impacts on traffic of the proposed development. It's important to note that the development itself has not actually been brought before the Planning Commission or the Board of Trustees as an official proposal. So right now what you're seeing are concepts and ideas, and part of the goal is for us to listen to and hear from the community and incorporate that feedback. And as you'll hear in the presentation, we've actually already done some of that pretty substantially. And then the last thing that we're going to talk a little bit about, you may have seen in some of the media coverage of the area and of the development itself, some talk of environmental concerns or some environmental contamination. Unfortunately, Eric, our environmental expert, had to turn around sick on his way here tonight. A couple of us talked to him at 5:45, so unfortunately Eric can't be here with us, so we're going to improvise a little bit. John is a very, very capable stand-in for Eric and is going to help answer as many questions as possible. And then when we break out, I'm also going to sit back in that corner, and for any of the questions that we're not able to answer that are really kind of Eric only questions, we're actually just going to take your name and your email address and have Eric reach out directly to you to answer those questions. So first part is going to be some presentations. The second part, a little different than the last neighborhood meetings we did based on some feedback. You'll notice on your tables you have pens and index cards. If a question comes up while the presentations are being done that you would like to ask, please go ahead and write that down. Caleb over in the corner and I will kind of circulate, and you can hold up your questions for us. And the most common or sort of the most broad questions that get asked we'll address as a full group. We'll ask of our different experts here tonight to answer those questions for the full group. And we'll do about 3 to 5 of kind of the biggest, most common questions. And then we're actually going to break out into smaller sections so that you can go to the area that's of most interest to you. So we're going to divide the room into little sections. Anyone that is interested in specifically talking about the buildings, the streetscapes, the materials, what it's going to look like, all that kind of stuff can come up to this corner. I'll go over this again when we get there. and talk to Will and Robert. Anyone that's interested in talking about the traffic implications and concerns can come right over here to this corner, and Genty is he's got drawings and all sorts of information that he'll walk through with you. Anyone interested in talking specifically about the environmental concerns and cleanup can actually go over to the back corner where Kai's sitting, and like I said, John and I will answer as many of the questions as we can and then take your questions for those that we're not able to answer and give to Eric. And then the last area that we're going to break out into is township services and economic development. So for anyone that has questions about the tax implications, about the township master plan, about other economic development that's going on in the township, any of that kind of fun stuff, Chris Buck from Meridian Township is here, and he will be the person over in this corner right here answering those questions. So it's not a one, you don't have to just pick one. And it's really kind of meant to be open house style. So you can go up to the table with the shortest line, you can get a chance to answer your questions or ask your questions and have more of a one-on-one conversation. And you can move around to the different areas that you're interested in. If you don't want to stick around and wait to have those questions answered, then you can simply write your question on one of the index cards and hand it to me, and we will get the answers emailed out to everybody, and you can get it in that way as well. So, questions about the format before we dive in? Yes?
Everyone being able to hear what other people's questions are, and I just, I think it would be way more helpful for a lot of us are going to be asking the same question.
Yep.
I would like to hear what other people have to say and break off it. I missed it all on the last.
Yep, and that's why as we're going through the presentations tonight, if you want to write down your questions on the Post-it cards, we are going to take those and ask kind of the most common questions. And then when we break out into the small groups, like I know last time, a lot of people had questions, specifically about like, this is my address. Is there environmental contamination where I live, and things like that. So we'll ask kind of some of those bigger group questions. That's a change from last time based on your feedback. We'll ask some of those big conversations for the group and big questions for the group, but also for those that don't want to stay for, an hour of questions. We'll do kind of the high points, and then we'll break out into the smaller groups so folks can go ask their more personalized, individualized questions. Yep, good point. Anything else? Okay, so now what you are actually interested in. Will and Robert are going to share a little bit with you about the proposed development at the corners of Okemos and Hamilton Roads and some of the vision for downtown Okemos. So, Will.
Thank you, Kate. I'm gonna kind of be moving around. I'm gonna be up and down, so I might actually sit in your seat in a minute. What I wanted to do first is just give you a perspective as to what you're looking at here. This is a perspective looking down Hamilton Street, Hamilton Road, toward the west at Okemos. So if I'm standing on the southwest corner at Okemos and Hamilton, and I'm looking down Hamilton to the west, if you see in the background here is the Hamilton building, which no matter what happens in this project, the Hamilton building will be saved as an historic building, but that'll give you reference to what we're looking for. The presentation you're seeing tonight was put together by myself and my company, True North Development. I'm Chief Operating Officer and lead developer for this project. Presley Architecture out of Northville. We've actually also got Hobbs and Black out of Ann Arbor working on the project. And Gibbs Planning Group. The presentation you're seeing tonight is actually the presentation that was given by Bob Gibbs himself to the Board of Trustees a couple of weeks ago. And then given by another staff member from Gibbs to the Planning Commission earlier this week on Monday night. We've presented a concept plan, and that is purely that, as in the eyes of the township. It basically sets the bar. It sets expectations. We have basically set the footprints of our buildings in our first phase. And what I'll be stepping you through tonight is kind of the process we've gone through to get us there. I've got over 50 slides here, so I'm going to move through fairly quickly. Let me give you the overview of the project, how we got here, and then we'll save questions to the end if that's okay with everyone. Thanks again for coming out tonight. This is a picture from back in, gosh, I don't even remember now. I think Bob had a date on this at one time, but this shows Main Street, Okemos, way back in the day looking east. This is Hamilton Road. This was called Detroit Street back in the day. And this is an idea of that before and now this is the after, with the kind of thought that we're looking at putting into the streetscape of Hamilton with very thoughtful storefronts and a public realm that would really encourage the walkability of the community. This is the old plat showing Detroit Street on the top. Actually, Grand River replaced Detroit Street. It was a plank road to Detroit from Lansing. And we are anticipating unearthing some of those planks. I understand that there was a similar project done in Birmingham recently where they ran into that whole layer of the old plank road. But when Grand River came along, it replaced the Detroit Street, and Detroit Street became Hamilton Road after Hamilton was renamed Okemos, after Chief Okemos passed away. So that's, interestingly enough, the grid that's here, the block pattern that's here, is the most efficient block pattern we could possibly use. We're going to duplicate it. We're going to utilize that. And Bob Gibbs in Gibbs Planning said that this is one of the more well laid out sites he's ever worked with, and he's worked on thousands around the country. So there's the two blocks that we're looking at for phase one. We refer to them as blocks 1 and 2, block 1 being on the top and block 2 being on the bottom. State Street is what's now Okemos Road. Meridian Township has a current population of about 43,400 people, average income of 100,000.
You said Detroit Street is Okemos Road. Are you sure that's what you meant?
No, that's not what I meant. State Street is Okemos Road. State Road is Okemos Road, yes. Detroit Street is Hamilton. Keep me straight. So 43.4 population, average income of 100. And here's something that's really interesting. The demographic profile that we're looking at for residents and to rent the rental properties that we're proposing are these 1 to 2 person households, and it's 68% in Meridian Township. That's a much higher level than most people think. We're seeing this demographic come at us from two directions. It's the millennials who do not even want to consider buying a home, and it's those who have owned a home for a long, long time, are tired of taking care of the property and the big house, and they're gone 6 months out of the year to Florida anyway. So give me a nice apartment and I'll live in that when I come back. Those two demographics, although they seem very different, like to cohabitate. They like to live in the same places. So we're seeing these demographics come back into urban settings. This is probably the most urban setting Meridian Township will see. It's a relative term, but that's what the real attraction is. This just shows the region that we're looking at, and it's interesting to me to look at to see the various employers that are in this region, that all of them, without fail, admit that their Achilles heel in attracting talent to their companies is, where am I going to live? Especially Michigan State University. So we really feel like that we're going to provide a living alternative that has not been available here, and that we're going to be the first choice of various, not just the university, but various companies around the greater metropolitan area to send them to Okemos to look at as a place to live permanently. We also believe that we're going to see a spike that's going to come along with the FRIB whenever that gets kicked off and going. Gibbs actually did a study in this process where he went out and looked at villages and that have grown up in the area, and this is similar to what we're talking about trying to establish in downtown Okemos is a village concept, not on the same scale as some of these villages that he's identified, but you can see that it's interesting that the villages are almost equidistant from each other. But Lansing, Greater Lansing, lacks this village concept. So we really feel like it can be a destination point within the Greater Lansing area. Gibbs Planning did a retail demand study for us, and he has concluded that there's new retail demand of around 45,000 square feet. The way that breaks down, you see in the chart here, we'll make this presentation available to any of you. We'll have it on our Four Corners page so that you can go back and review these numbers. But that's the breakdown. We're taking that breakdown one step further, and we're actually taking somewhat of a rifle approach and assigning the preferred uses to the various retail spaces that we have to lease, and we're going after specific users for those spaces, kind of a limited offering approach. This is the existing conditions that we're all too familiar with. There's our beautiful bottoms-up corner. I'm just going to run through these quickly just to refresh everyone's mind what we're looking at today. One of the things that we're going to be watching through the project, and I challenge you to watch it too, is we're looking at what's referred to as a WalkScore. There's an app you can get on your phone, and you can put your address in and find out what your WalkScore is. We believe that we are going to take downtown Okemos from something that's around a 50 right now, and we hope to get up to and hit something close to what you'll see in downtown Petoskey today, which is an 85 or 90. In that scenario, also, not only are we addressing pedestrian safety, but also bicycle and how everybody shares the road with the cars. One of the other big things that we're looking at is in the high density areas of this core downtown development that's taken place. If you look at this map, this is the 5 blocks that were put into the new MUPUD with the township that allows higher densities to occur and higher building heights to occur within these red lines. It's not really an appropriate place to put a green space or park. We have a very unique situation in that we've got a 15-acre park that's very underutilized immediately to our south. So we'll be working diligently with the homeowners along Clinton Avenue to try to program some connections, some really strong connections through the wetlands and through additional sidewalks or trails to establish that connection down to Wanch Park. There's also conversation during the bridge project with the Road Commission that there might be a under the road way to get from Wanch Park across to Ferguson Park and vice versa without crossing over Okemos Road. So we've got multiple projects coming together here, all of which are have quite an intimidating scope. One of which is the replacement of the bridge at Wanch Park. That bridge is going to get replaced in the next few years. We're coordinating with the Road Commission to make sure that we can do all this work simultaneously instead of having a construction zone for the next 5 years. Keep stepping through this. So there's our site. You can see the primary connection there at Okemos and Hamilton. What we are doing actually, since we've got such a traffic issue of 40,000 cars a day going north and south on Okemos Road, we are going to move our center of the new town center 1 block to the west, and we're going to make Ardmore and Hamilton main and main. So you'll start to see that come together as future phases occur. The next phase that would be developed, assuming these two are successful, would be to go to the next block to the west, where Douglas J. will be leaving that building and coming to the new building at the corner of Okemos and Hamilton. Along Hamilton Street, we've got apartments over retail. We thought it was very important to put both sides of Hamilton in the first phase of construction because that's what's going to create that place. And that's the real amenity of this project is the place that's going to be created. Along Okemos Road itself, we can't put parking in front of those buildings, so we're looking at using having apartments over offices along the Okemos Road frontage. And then along the Ardmore Street frontage on the backside, we go to a purely residential use where we have townhomes on the top and bottom of the building and flats in the middle. So that's pure residential. The parking is interior to the buildings. It's almost a Texas donut, as they refer to it in the development business, where the parking is wrapped by buildings. Block 2, which is the block to the south, gets an entire level, 206 parking spaces below grade. Those 206 spaces will be the priority parking for the tenants who choose to live here full-time. So we got total retail of 40,000 square feet coming in this first phase. We got 27,000 square feet of office, 20,000 of that which will be allocated to a collaborative workspace. We have a national company that has come to us. We're working with them on a Lansing site too. And we're excited that that's coming here because it's truly an amenity to the demographic that's going to be living here. It'll be something like what you've seen with WeWork and/or Regis. It's a new startup company that's involved in that industry. We're going to have 8 to 12 service businesses, 3 to 5 restaurants. We made the sidewalks on the north side of the street wider so we can better accommodate curbside dining in the nice weather. Obviously, we want that wider sidewalk to occur on the south-facing side of that street. Again, walkability is going to be a real focus. Also, signage. We're going to have be encouraging vintage type, very eclectic signage that's going to be very unique. And again, outdoor dining spaces that will be seasonal, come and go. We always park the cars on one side of the street, and again, it provides that barrier and provides some safety for the people that are dining on the sidewalks. Public realm all the way around. We'll see something similar to this all the way around each block. The plan is to develop all 4 sides of both blocks, including the Okemos Road side. So we will do a curb and gutter street at Clinton, Ardmore, and Methodist, as well as the main drag of the boulevard through Hamilton Street. There we are. This is a marketing plan that we've put together. This is taking one step further, showing you the specific areas we're wanting to put cafes and/or restaurants on the corners, with smaller boutique type stores in between those locations. This just gives you an idea of the level of detail that we're going into as it relates to the streetscape. This is still a work in progress. We're playing with the idea of snow melt under the sidewalks on the Hamilton Street corridor. These site furnishings just give you an idea of the level of quality and the level of thought that's going into all of this. This is the streetscape program. Summary: 40,000 square feet of retail, 27,000 square feet of office. It's a total of 276,000 square feet of buildings in the first phase, in 5 separate buildings, and 154 residential units. This is a reduction from where we were early on when we talked to this group early. Due to the planners that were involved and the architects that were involved, we think that there's an appropriate scale and an appropriate style for these buildings. Now our plan and our challenge is to figure out if we can afford to build the buildings that we'd like to build. This is somewhat of a you go to the end and back up. As you know, we've established the TIF program back with the DDA in downtown Okemos, and that's going to be the vehicle that we use to establish the TIF district. And we'll be able to recover these public infrastructure costs that are so great, including the environmental cleanup and the brownfield. This is another picture just of Hamilton Street looking west, just to give you a few more views. And this is Hamilton Street looking back east towards Okemos Road. That's standing in front of the existing Hamilton building. I'm now going to let Robert Miller step in and give you a little bit of the architecture and understand that the footprints of these buildings and the heights of these buildings are much more set at this point than the actual facades and elevations. We're starting that study now and trying to identify the various materials. So some of the questions you're going to have tonight that get specific, we're probably not going to have answers for you yet, but we promise the answers are to come.
And while they're doing that handoff, if you already have questions and you want to pop your index card up in the air, Caleb and I will come around and collect those. Go ahead, Robert.
Can everyone hear me if I don't use the microphone?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Good evening, I'm Robert Miller with M Architects, one of the architects.
The
Actually,
cameras need it.
oh, the cameras need it, okay, all right. Sorry, I really don't.
Technology.
I don't like really using these things all that much, but I'm sorry again. Robert Miller with M Architects. We actually are one of the 3 architectural firms working on this project, and we think that's important because as we look at this, when we're trying to create a character of street facade for this village, is to create diversity within the architecture and authenticity within the architecture as well. So we want to create multiple facades along the streets so it feels like an authentic downtown. So bringing on 3 architects creates 3 different viewpoints of this project. That's been important as we've gone through the entire dialogue of design for this, both from a design standpoint and a programming standpoint. As Will mentioned, initially we were looking at a much larger project, more units, more height, more density. But through our dialogue of multiple professionals looking at this, we've reduced the size and scale of the project. And so as we go through this, we'll talk about that a little bit, but it's really going to be more important as we take a look when we get further into the project, when we start to make actual presentations for the design, that you see that. And you can see a little bit within their character of the street facades that we're actually taking the buildings and breaking them up into multiple facades. So if we take a look at the floor plans, Block 1 will be on the north side of Hamilton, Block 2 on the south side of Hamilton, with Hamilton coming straight through, Okemos up on top. So what you're actually looking at is technically the basement level. So we have basement underneath Block 1. Block 2 is what we're calling the underground parking. However, it's kind of underground, not underground. It's almost like a walkout basement in a way, because we have a low point here at Clinton Street. We have a low point up here at Okemos Street. We have high points throughout. So actually this part here is actually down at grade level at Clinton and Ardmore. So when you pull into the parking structure, you're actually pulling in at grade. You're not dropping down. So if we go up one more floor to the second level, sorry, Will, Fana, thank you. So now as we come up now, we experienced this at Clinton and Ardmore here, is that when we drive down, we're driving underneath the actual ground level of the project. So this will be the ground level of the project, first floor. So we're going to have retail along all corners of the building along Hamilton. We're going to have retail on both sides of Hamilton. So Hamilton almost really becomes our main street. This becomes the center core of Main Street. So that we're going to have Douglas J up in the corner, more as the entry gate point coming into the development. And we're going to have ground level parking behind the spaces with townhouses along Ardmore here. Going up one more level, again, at the corner of Okemos and Hamilton, we're going to continue on with the second level of office space and retail space, again, Douglas J. And then we begin our residential units. So we have the second level will be residential units. Third level will be residential units as well. Fourth level will be residential units, but what's important to note about this is that in some certain areas, we actually, though you probably can't see it, these areas here are actually not units, they're actually terraces for amenity spaces up on the upper level. So we want to pull back the height. That's where we decided to pull back scale and proportion of this building so that we can reduce the size and the impact of that. So we start to take a look at cutting out corners so that we're not looking at 5-story buildings. We're not even looking at 4-story buildings. We're looking at 3-story buildings with setbacks for 4th levels and setbacks for 5th levels, which if we get to the 5th level, we've drastically reduced the 5th level. According to the ordinance, we could actually build a 5-story building on all these blocks that we're looking at right now. But again, we felt that was too much development for this village. So we're only taking a look at small areas and pockets that have 5th floor levels to them. And even then, those are actually set back 10 feet from the 4th floor below. So when you're on the street facade, you don't even really experience that 5th level. And in some cases, you hardly experience the 4th level either.
And that'll be a rooftop terrace.
Yes.
Those 5th floor areas are only reached from within the townhome that originates on the 4th floor, just so you know.
2-story units.
They're 2-story townhome units at that level.
Mm-hmm. And that was it. So I want to do that pretty quickly because I'm sure y'all got questions and want to meet up with us. So I wanted to go through that pretty quickly. So at that point, I'm going to pass it back over.
Okay, perfect. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through some of the more general questions. If there's any other general questions, if you wanna throw them up in the air, Caleb will come around and grab those, and we'll kind of go through some of the more big picture general questions together, and then we'll break out into the smaller groups. We're gonna start with the questions about this stuff, and I'm gonna let Genti we'll save like traffic and environmental questions for after his part. We'll answer these questions now while he's changing over to his presentation, and then do the same for traffic if that makes sense for you. So, the first question that we're going to go through, there are some, as Will had said during the presentation, some of these are things that we don't quite know yet. But one of the questions I think a lot of you guys would probably be really interested in is what the anticipated rent for the units will be, and if there will be any condo units available at this point. So, Will, you want to tackle the rent question-ish? Yeah. You want to talk about the research that's been done so far?
We actually know where the rents need to be, and that's what drives what we can afford to build. The rents that we're proposing right now in our pro formas is we're looking at about $2 a foot. Now, that's higher on a smaller unit on a per foot basis. It's lower on a larger unit, but an average 1,000 square foot 2-bedroom apartment would be $2,000. It's going to be the highest rent in the marketplace. We only need 154 people. We only need 154 renters. So we're going after someone who is willing to pay for quality and location. This is not going to be your normal apartment community. We believe that there's enough demand in the upper end to go after that. Everything that we're building in phase 1 is for rent. It's not for sale. I believe that there will be some for sale product built in the village over time. I don't know that we're going to be the builders of that product because it's not what we do. But I do anticipate that there probably will be some for sale product in the future. Was that the answer to that question?
I mean, yes. Did that answer? Okay, great. Lots of awesome questions. So I'm going to combine a couple of them for the interest of time. We have some questions about parking. One of the questions is how many spaces per unit, which currently is 1. And of course, the follow-up question to that most people have is, so what do you do with your second vehicle? And I'm also going to have you talk at the same time about the business and commercial parking and how that plays in.
Okay, all right. The parking requirements, we're working through this with the township. The ordinance of the township is pretty antiquated, and I don't think I hurt anybody's feelings by saying that. Everybody acknowledges that. So what we're seeing nationally these days is we're seeing the parking requirements, in particular in urban environments, go down dramatically as to what they used to be. What we anticipate is having 1 reserved space per unit in the subterranean parking deck. But that'll only be 1 space. In addition to that, we're going to have open parking on the Douglas J lot, which will be basically left as is once Douglas J moves. That will be parking, that will be surface parking available for any overflow, guest parking, and so on. We also have on-street parking all the way around each block. I would see that used as guest parking for anyone visiting any one of the tenants of the apartments. It's going to be retail parking during the day mostly. So you're going to see some overlap of uses, some daytime uses, some nighttime uses. But at the end of the day, we're going to end up at about 1 car per bedroom on the project. And that should be sufficient. We are going in with our eyes wide open. This is Michigan. People drive cars everywhere, especially in the wintertime. So we would be absolutely shooting ourselves in the foot to underpark this site. So we're working very closely with the township as well as our traffic engineers to make sure that the parking we provide is adequate.
Okay, I love this next question. I feel like a game show host up here, guys. Love this next question. Because I know how much Kai loves getting called out during public meetings, but Kai in the back is actually with CATA, and we have a question about will there be public transportation on Hamilton? And I'll let you add to this as well, but one thing I will note, the details of public transportation have not yet been sorted out, but even just as you can tell by Kai's presence here tonight, CATA has been a phenomenal partner that has been at the table at this project from the onset. They were the first taxing jurisdiction to opt into the DDA TIF plan, which they did so unanimously, and I would even say highly enthusiastically, and have actually said repeatedly, we want to be a part of this project as things move along so that we can come up with public transportation solutions. So
we have been working closely with the Road Commission for almost a year on this project because of the logistics that are going to go into not only the construction of the improvements, but just in the traffic flow in general. We have been through the exercise of doing the traffic study and looking at our traffic flows before and after development. We have not gotten to a point, and I know, Kai, we're past due on getting together. Dan's been trying to get us together, but I can tell you for sure that public transit is going to be a part of the program. Where that public transit gets accessed has not been determined yet. So we'll be making those decisions as we go to the next step and talk with CATA about this. But the answer to the question is yes, public transportation will be a part of the program.
all right, a quick question. The residential on Ardmore, what's the proposed stories for those?
Those on Ardmore?
So the 5 stories along Ardmore with flats along, and
The
then,
top story is set back with rooftop patios on the roof at that level.
awesome. Do we know yet anything about awnings or other type of accoutrements outside of signage?
As far as you're talking about the storefronts, this is a place where Bob Gibbs says the devil's in the details, and it's all about the storefronts. We in the MUPUD modification that was done, there's a requirement of 14-foot clear space on the first floor to give that high ceiling feeling at that first floor level. If you do the storefront right, that's where the eyes go. The building above the storefront almost needs to be underemphasized. So we are going to be putting a lot of effort into the individual storefronts for colors, awnings, and so on, again, to make it look as if all of these stores came along at different points. You might see one that looks like the old drugstore and another that has a more modern glass front, but it's going to flow and it's going to work and it's going to look like these buildings were built over different periods of time. So you'll see a lot of effort going into that. We're actually going to be looking into some ideas of some facade grants and trying to get something going that gives a retail tenant incentive to do some really nice things on these storefronts. So that will be, awnings will be a part of that.
That actually ties in really well to another question that we had, and then I'll do 2 more questions before we move on to the traffic portion. And again, remember, if you have additional questions, that's what the breakouts are for. You can come up. We're recording all of the breakout.
Just add a couple quick things. I'm thrilled with a ton of your ideas, but I will say, when you've got Hamilton, you've got a 5-story building here, and 5-story, it's going to be dark. I mean, pretty much year round. That street will not have sun. Briefly in the morning, and I think perhaps putting some shops on the backside, which, where the river is, and have shops on Hamilton, but also have some eating areas, so you're going to, kind of have the river feel back there. And also, the 5 stories is a bit much scale-wise because it won't take far a block from there and you will see the monolith. It will be huge.
So let's actually talk a little bit. We'll come back to that other question. One of the questions that someone submitted was, could you elaborate on why the scale has been reduced? So if you guys want to talk a little bit, maybe Robert, if you want to talk a little bit about, one of the primary reasons that the scale was reduced from 5 stories everywhere to just a handful of little 5-story pop-ups, 3 stories closer to the ends, and then 4 stories in the middle, was direct feedback at meetings like this about that concern of that 5 scale. But can you talk a little bit about kind of the 5th story and how that's going to impact sightlines? And I mean, it would be naive to say there will not be an impact, right? Like, it would be naive to say that. But can you talk a little bit about some of the steps being try to mitigate that?
Yeah, sure. So again, through the design process, the reason why we brought the scale of the buildings down was Bob Gibbs, the planner on this. He doesn't like saying this, but he is a world-renowned city planner. He has designed cities all over the world. And looking at this, he came into this project and said, 5 stories is too big. It's too big for a village. But you can have portions of the buildings be 5 stories, and it still has the quality of the village that you're looking for. So we're really looking at 3 to 4 story buildings with portions of them going up to 5 stories. In doing that, it creates that authentic, I cannot say that word to save my life, that authentic downtown feel that we're going for. And again, that they're set back from the 4-story below by 10 feet. In doing those setbacks, it does help with some of the sunlight coming through. The one thing with the sunlight, and it's a valid point when we talk about new construction, it's always a concern, especially if if you're building a house next door to somebody and you say it's too tall, you're going to kill my garden. Those types of things are valid. When we're looking at creating downtowns, the sunlight is a valid point, but it's really the experience along the street that we're looking for, and the lighting and the treescapes and everything that occurs along through there, and the feeling of being outside. So when you're in downtowns, you get certain hours of the day that have sunlight and certain hours that don't, which is why we're actually pushing all of the restaurants and the outdoor seating area to the north side. That will get more sunlight throughout the year than on the south side. So we're actually pushing more sunlight to be on the outdoor areas. I hope that helps.
So for my timing question person, we'll actually do that at the end. We'll do that as our very last question, because you're going to hear some other timing things that might inform that. So the last question we'll do for this section, and then again, I'll do another round of picking up the questions, and we'll go into our breakout groups. But it's going to be you again. What will make the plan unique and identifiable as Okemos, as opposed to just anywhere USA? So do you want to talk a little bit about that kind of multiple architect approach that is being, I don't know which one of you guys wants to handle it, but I found that to be a really interesting aspect of the project, is all the different architects working on it to try to help with that.
Robert, you want to hit that one?
I can try.
Uniqueness to any community actually it really comes from the community itself. And I'm sorry, that really sounds cheesy, but it's really where it comes from. So the uniqueness of the architecture is going to come from the fact that we're trying to emulate this idea that it was always here, that we're not building something brand new and modern that we might see in downtown Lansing or downtown Ann Arbor, where you're doing 600-foot long buildings, which is what we're seeing in certain areas. We're trying to build this into 30 to 40 to 50-foot buildings, so it creates that authentic feel. I think part of the thing with this is that in trying to make something of a character of Okemos, it's a little bit difficult to find that character because there really wasn't a true downtown Okemos. We're creating something new and fresh, but we're using a more antique way of taking a look at that. So the uniqueness is hopefully just going to come from the fact that we're creating an entire new environment for this community to have pride towards that, of being able to come to a walkable community, a walkable area to shop and to eat. Do you want to add to that?
I'm trying to teach him how to say Okemos, by the way. We had a session before we came here tonight, and he did so good for the first part of and then he blew it again. And then you went to Okemos. Okemos. As far as this, I don't expect that we're gonna. I'm not trying to exceed the quality of villages and downtowns in Michigan, because that is a tough bill to fill. If we can just emulate some of these wonderful villages that are out there, and you know where they are, they're in Northville. Birmingham's a little bit more suburban, but help me with some Williamston, Petoskey. I mean, it's East Grand Rapids. It goes on and on and on. If we could emulate and recreate any of those areas and plop them down in Okemos, Michigan, that would be wonderful. But we're going to create our own place, and it's gonna grow organically once we get this first phase on the ground. And all we can do is try to keep these buildings from being monolithic. They're actually connected at the second floors up. So there are one building when you get above the street level, but you have the cut-throughs that actually separate these buildings. Again, what drives the volume at the end of the day is the need for the project to be a certain size in order to give the TIF funds to pay for the infrastructure that has to be in the ground for this project to occur. The reason the past projects failed is the volume wasn't there, and neither was the vehicle, the mechanism through the DDA to do the TIF. So would I prefer to build 3-story buildings? Would that be more in scale with the surrounding neighborhoods? Definitely would be, but the project won't get built. So I just want you to understand the economics of that, and that's what drives the ultimate size of this project is the revenue it's got to produce. The increment, the tax increment that's created by the new buildings that gets built is what is used to pay for this upgrade. We got a major upgrade of Okemos Road that's going to occur from really north of Methodist all the way down to and through the park area and the bridge. So we're talking about a major reconstruction of Okemos Road as well as the roads around these blocks, and it's expensive. Yes.
Well, can you just briefly address the environmental contamination natural as the first phase of this, because we haven't talked about that tonight, and that's a critical.
Yeah, John's gonna do a whole presentation on that part.
Separately?
Yeah, like after Nancy goes. But if you want
to, we're gonna hit on parking, and we're gonna hit on environmental. You wouldn't mind if I go ahead and say some things, would you, John? Environmental. There's a tremendous amount of environmental cleanup work that has to be done on this site. The worst part of that is the cleaners that has volatile chemicals in the ground that have to be removed. DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, who's present here tonight. Hey, Janet. Is actually going to be self-performing some of that work, and they've been waiting to self-perform that work because they needed a project to force them to do that. And so the project is pushing this cleanup to occur. From a timing standpoint, you'll see DEQ on the site at the cleaners, starting that cleanup sometime in the June-July timeframe. Am I good so far? Am I being optimistic? July. Once DEQ gets out of there, they'll have a duration of 60 to 90 days, and then we'll come right in behind them and start the construction of the lower parking garage. We've got a 2-year first phase. It's going to take a while to do this. So we're looking at spring, summer of 2021 before buildings will be open and occupied in this first phase. The overall project, including all 3 blocks, and then maybe the portion of a 4th block, is going to probably looking at a 10-year duration, just to give you an idea. It's always our goal to do as much work in the first phase as we possibly can, so that we protect the lifestyles and the privacy and of the existing tenants that come in early into the project.
I do want to be mindful of time, but we got 2 more questions that I think everyone will be interested in, and then Genty's going to talk to you about traffic specifically. John's going to talk a little bit more in depth about the environmental stuff, including showing some images. But the first one is just to, you started to touch on the timeline, which was one of our questions. The first one is just to clarify what, like specifically how much of Hamilton will be redone in phase 1. And I'll hold up the map for you so you can point to it for people.
What we'll do in the first phase is we will actually, where am I? Okemos Road, okay. We will build Hamilton all the way through this interchange, this intersection. So that intersection, which will become Main and Main, gets built as part of phase 1, and the boulevard between the blocks there gets built in phase 1. The boulevard will continue on Hamilton along and through that next block, including in front of the Masons building. Okay, there it is. So we'll be building the street all the way through to here in the first phase.
Okay. Last question for now, not the last question. Last question for now, because I know Tim's going to get us if we don't ask this one. Will there be long-term parking for bikes for residents in addition to temporary bike parking for shopping? And can you talk a little bit about the biking plans along Hamilton Road and the new road design?
Tim, did you write that question? I'm going to be at your transportation committee meeting in a couple of weeks. I talked to Mark today, but all I know is that we want to accommodate pedestrians and bicycles. We've been serving the almighty car first, and that always seems to be the way it happens, Tim. But it's just as important to us, or more so, because the quality of this place is going to be based upon its walkability. Bicycles are between walkability and cars, and so we want to accommodate that. We want to provide whatever parking, permanent, covered, secure, whatever is in demand by the tenants and the people that are frequenting this project. We want it to become a place where people want to linger, whether they're at the park or whether they're shopping or having a cup of coffee or having dinner. So we want to address the bikes. I would say that that's going to be done simultaneously with the CATA, because buses and bicycles and people, you got a pretty good challenge there when you get in this kind of a dense situation. So we don't have any specifics yet there as to exactly the things that we're going to do, but the accommodation of bicycles is an amenity. And so we want to do that and provide those things for our tenant base, but we don't want to provide services and things that aren't in demand and that don't add any value. So you ask a loaded question, you got a loaded answer, Tim.
Okay, are you ready to talk traffic? So Getty's here to talk to us a little bit about a traffic study that was conducted and what it said. There are a few questions in here that kind of pertain to traffic, the construction impacts and things like that. So he's going to try to speak to those questions as he goes through this portion.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Genty Okemos with Hubble Roth and Clark. And we started this process back in December of 2017, and we're working closely with the Ingham County Road Department ever since to try to identify what the improvements would have to be to support this kind of development. And the goals of the traffic study were twofold. We wanted to understand what the existing conditions were, and then what the improvements would have to be to support the development. And our main objective was to maintain traffic levels at acceptable levels of service and provide improvements wherever feasible. So what I want to talk about, there's quite a few details in the traffic study, but I want to just touch upon some of the main improvements we're proposing. The one main improvement that is kind of driving this entire study is we are converting the east leg of Okemos and Hamilton from 2 receiving lanes, a left turn lane and a shared turn right, into a shared turn right lane, dual left turn lanes, and 1 receiving lane. And part of the reason for that is because most of the traffic that happens here for this movement is really people going south to the freeway. Especially in the PM, you see backups that go all the way to the roundabout. So by including the dual left turns, we're able basically to process double the amount of vehicles at the same time. What that does is it reduces the backup at the roundabout, but also allows us to take some of the green time from the signal and distribute it to the other legs to improve traffic flow at the other sides. The other improvement that we are proposing is to add a left turn lane between Methodist and Clinton at this phase to allow lefts onto Hamilton from Okemos Road. Right now, these lefts are made at Methodist and Clinton, which are not really meant for that. Especially at Clinton, if you are making a northbound left, you are really stopping on the through lane, you're blocking the through traffic, you're essentially cutting in half the capacity of that road. And also it leads to unsafe behavior because you're waiting for traffic to clear from the southbound movement, and everybody knows how busy this road is, so eventually you will just go for it. So by removing the left turns at these points, we're leaving the pressure there and allowing them at the intersection of Hamilton and Okemos. The other improvement we are doing is on Hamilton Road, as Will kind of touched upon, we're introducing a boulevard there. that boulevard serves different purposes. One of them is it better allows us to line the roads cross section with the new changes that we are making to the east leg of the intersection, but also serves as a traffic calming device because vehicles tend to slow down as they're going through the area. So you can imagine driving through here and all the way up to Deliverance, vehicles will probably have to slow down because you have the boulevard and also the parallel parking. And also the median serves as a refuge for pedestrians crossing the street. It creates a more sense of place and a more walkable environment. So that's the general idea of the traffic study. This traffic study was actually approved by the county as of last Friday. And overall, level of service will remain at acceptable levels. And we'll project to see some improvements for the westbound movement on Hamilton as well as the northbound movement on Okemos.
So you're saying that the traffic flows should potentially even be better post-development, even within the building?
Correct. Because the key is really we're increasing the capacity because of dual lefts at the east leg, and also because we're adding a left turn lane, which right now does not exist. And in addition to that, this entire signal will be modernized. We're talking about $250,000 improvement just to redo that signal.
It hit on the fact that we're given 19 feet of land and the accommodation of Tim's bike lane.
Right. So so the goal is to widen the street from the center line and west. So basically, we're adding 10 feet that doesn't exist right now for the left turn lane, and an additional 4 feet for the bike lane, which at this point will go from between the project limits from Methodist all the way to Clinton, and hopefully once new projects come online on this other side, they can build on that connection. Yeah.
All right. So we had a couple of traffic questions. Can you talk a little bit about how some of these changes will kind of reroute and change traffic around Okemos Road? In particular, it wasn't one of these questions, but I've heard repeatedly concerns from neighbors along Hamilton about people cutting through and concerns surrounding that. So can you talk a little bit how some of these changes will affect that, please?
Sure. So with the first question on Okemos Road, we're not really rerouting any traffic. There's the volume on Okemos Road will remain there. There's very limited options to get to the freeway. So we recognize that, and which is why we're making these accommodations. As it relates to Hamilton, we're not projecting any cut-through traffic. One of that is because the boulevard will serve one purpose. It will slow people down. The signal itself will also slow people down because it doesn't really prioritize Hamilton. It prioritizes Okemos. So those are some of the things that we are doing to minimize those issues.
And then another question we had, it's probably going to be kind of a shared question, but the construction itself, the impact of the construction itself, whether that be on traffic, on the nearby areas and the neighbors themselves, can you speak a little bit to the impacts of the actual construction? And then we'll go to kind of the...
Right. So from a traffic perspective, I mean, there's really no going around this. This will close down lanes to build this sort of development. We are working with Ingham County, though, to coordinate this project and any other project in the area to minimize that disruption. So we still don't have the details of all the detour routes and all the lane closure at this point, but the goal is to minimize everything by working with Ingham County and coordinating between the different projects that are happening in the area, such as the bridge project to the south.
And will you just clarify too, real quick, going back to the curb to curb, like that width widening, that's going to be done during as a part of the construction, correct?
Correct, yeah. So as I think Will touched on this as well, there's going to be curb to curb all over the two blocks.
And then, Will, is there anything you wanted to add about the construction impacts? It sucks.
It's not going to be a pleasant thing, and all that we're going to try to do is we're going to try to communicate ahead of time. We're talking with Kate and the township as well as the road commission about bringing up a website. I don't know if any of you have looked at the website that's attached to the Holt project that's going on Cedar Street right now, but this is going to be an interactive website that's updated regularly by multiple participants. And so it's going to give lane closures. It's going to talk about phasing strategies and cautions and those kinds of things. So that will be separate from the developer, but it'll be a public website that we can continue to give updates.
Yeah, so we'll do our shameless plugs right now for you. And then also for those of you that sign in and put your emails down, we'll email out the links for you. But there are already social media profiles up now for the Village of Okemos where you can, we don't have a ton of updates being shared yet, but where information is being shared, including meetings like this. And then you can also sign up for an email alert system so that you can get emailed as we actually get into things. And there are things like, as well as lane closures or things like that. And then we'll do our last traffic question before we move on to environmental. So Genti's got the question talking about that dual left on Hamilton to Okemos and why we're not just doing it right now. And so he's, ta-da, so he's gonna talk about that.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I mean, you are really limited to what you have there right now. In order for the dual lefts to work, you need to upgrade the signal. Well, anyway, so you need to update. You need to you need to upgrade the signals. The lanes that are receiving these dual lefts have to be wide enough to be able to contain those two left turns. So these lanes right now are 10 feet existing. We are actually widening them at the entry point to receive those lanes at 11 feet, and they will go down to 10 feet as it goes all the way down to Clinton. Another fact that you can't do dual lefts right now is the cross section of this leg of the intersection has to match with the opposite leg so you don't have those conflicts.
You'd be driving straight through bottoms up.
Yep. That's exactly it. So that's the short answer, I guess. You just don't have the geometrics and the operational factors to make that work.
Okay, and as a reminder, all of the questions that we're collecting and answering, Caleb's been over there in the corner feverishly typing, and we're collecting all of the questions, so we'll also share all of those answers in writing in addition to what you're hearing tonight, and of course, HOMTV is here, so you'll be able to access that. So we're gonna do one more changeover and talk about environmental, and then we'll let you come ask your individual questions about my neighborhood and my street. So John, let's do it. Let's talk environmental.
Good evening, John Peckham with Advanced Redevelopment Solutions, and I'm subbing as indicated for Eric Helzer, the principal who can't make it this evening. Oh, a little too far away? I'm with you. At any rate, I think one of the important things that the community understands, this has been on DEQ's list, this Four Corners, for quite some time in terms of sites that need attention from an environmental cleanup perspective. That being said, I'm going to give you the real 30,000-foot flyby on this in terms of participation from DEQ and the township as it relates to the financial portion of this that makes this all feasible to develop from a redevelopment perspective. The work that DEQ is going to be executing is about the work that DEQ will be self-performing with their contractors is roughly $1 million. That will be the site where the Okemos Cleaners was. There's chlorinated solvents there. That is the most intense environmental location. That area will be excavated. When that excavation is done by DEQ, then the contractors for the developer will take over and continue that excavation throughout the balance of the block so that the underground parking can be constructed and the balance of the environmental remediation completed. DEQ grants total $1.3 million for this project. DEQ loans are $1 million. And then developer loans are $3.75 million. So that gives you a total of $7.1 million in grants, loans, and incentives, reimbursements, if you will, through the TIF program through the township. And we've been working, as Will indicated, very closely with the township on the brownfield plan so that everyone in the community can take advantage and benefit from the environmental efforts that are taking place here. Okay, have you got the layout? If you pull, okay. Well, I'll just go over it. It's, yeah. Yeah, I
I'm
don't.
gonna give you this.
All right.
To help you.
Okay, so where is Okemos here? I got to get, okay, very good. Here's Hamilton and Okemos. I'm upside down here. Okay, so this is the old dry cleaner site right here. That's the one with chlorinated solvents that DEQ will be taking their contractors out and remediating. All of the buildings that you see on these blocks will be coming down, okay, as part of this. Across Hamilton is where there was a gas station located there. There is environmental efforts that are going to take place there, as well as the balance of this entire block, okay? The levels of those efforts will vary based on the types of efforts that are necessary. On the corner up here where Bottoms Up was, used to be a gas station. There are issues there as well. So it's really a multitude of factors that come into play here. The long and short of it is it's a pretty complicated environmental site. There will be that ought to about do that. Okay. So real quickly again, that's where the cleaners is, right there on the corner of Hamilton and Ardmore. The areas that you see identified in different colors are different activities that are going to occur. The green is the petroleum-based area that will be remediated. The yellow area indicates the area that's eligible for the tax increment financing reimbursement that's part of the loans that go with this. So in a nutshell, Bottoms Up, that's where the old gas station was there, gas station there. There's currently soil borings being done on the site, so the water table is going to be established, and we're going to know where we are in that regard as well. All of those areas are out of the floodplain, so that's not a factor from an environmental perspective. So
I'm gonna pull up a couple of the other.
that's just simply indicating the buildings that will come down. Again, that's just the cleaners there, the old cleaner site. So all those X's that you see are structures that will come down as a part of this effort.
Okay, so I'm gonna steal this back from your pack. If you want to hold up your environmental questions, if you have any as we go around, and then I'm gonna have you address one that we had from before. I know you mentioned that this isn't in the floodplain specifically, but if you want to talk a little bit about this, that'd be great.
Sure. Okay. The question is that have we considered design that would anticipate upcoming changes to the floodplain boundaries? And the answer to that is those floodplain boundaries haven't been totally identified yet from an elevation perspective. That's still in process. That being said, the entire development here is out of the floodplain. The floodplain line runs right along here at Ardmore and Clinton, and this development will be outside of the floodplain where the structures will be. So as we continue to gather more information and those floodplain limits are reestablished, if you will, then we'll deal with them at that time.
All right, nope, you got more. You're not out of it yet. How are we handling stormwater?
Stormwater for this site will be collected on site here in a detention area and then discharged through the county drain system. It will all be pre-treated, as they call it, so that the water that currently runs off the site, the new rate will not exceed what currently runs off the site, and it will go through what I call a filtration type system that will cleanse that to the best.
Gutters tie into underground.
Yes. So roof drains, everything, parking lot drainage, all of it's going to tie in. It will leave the site at the same rate as it currently leaves the site.
It'll just be underground instead of on the surface.
Exactly.
Really common question that we get, I think these two kind of tie together. What's the total cleanup by the DEQ and the project as a whole as a part of phase one? How much will it address? And then talking a little bit about that, the creep toward the river and how that's being kind of contained.
The answer on the dollar amount is $7.1 million in total in terms of those activities that will qualify for either DEQ participation, reimbursement, grant, loan, and also the TIF reimbursement program. As it relates to, what was your last part of the question there?
The plume moving toward the river.
Okay.
The big pier.
As far as that goes, we're doing soil borings right now. The geotechnical team is out there. And once we have the results from water tables and what the level of the aquifer is and where we have perched water and not perched water, we don't have all that information just yet. So that'll be forthcoming over the next couple months.
But the plume is generally going to the southwest.
Correct.
Southwest of the northwest corner of block 2. So just trace that with your finger. No, from the pink area, the plume, the chemical plume. It's going from there. It's there. Correct. Gravity is taking care of that.
And actually, Will, this one's for you. Will Douglas J and the Masonic Temple need cleanup, and will that happen as a part of phase one?
No, it will not happen as a part of phase one. The source for any plume that's migrated into that block, into the Douglas J Masonic block, is going to be eliminated. So there will be no more migration because we're eliminating the source. DEQ is eliminating that source, and that's why they want to self-perform that work to secure that's been done before they leave there.
And then the last question before we break into our groups is, this is, for those of you that aren't already familiar, this is a question I've heard a lot. Can you talk a little bit about dry cleaning chemicals, how they get into the soil, and why this is such a big deal from a contamination standpoint?
Janet might want to
Oh, Janet, you want to educate all of us on?
Would you like to? Good. Because, yeah, you did, because I am not an environmental engineer. So anyway, thank you, Janet. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Janet Mahalik. I'm with the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. And traditionally, it happens differently at every site. So a lot of dry cleaners, they're chlorinated solvents. So the things that they use to dry clean your clothes are harmful to us in general if they are released into the environment. And so the traditional ways that they get into the environment, unfortunately, are previous housekeeping practices of dumping them outside doors, in drains. There were I don't know that there were tanks on this particular property, but traditionally there could also have been underground storage tanks that could have released these. I believe here, I don't think there were any for the actual dry cleaner itself, but that's just other typical sites that have dry cleaners on them and what can happen. So in general, that's usually how they get released into the environment. Dry cleaning solvents tend to sink, so they actually get into the aquifer and then kind of can migrate. And so unfortunately they're a lot harder to chase than, say, gasoline, petroleum constituents that will sit on top of the water tables and whatnot. So
Okay, so thank you for your patience. We're going to break into our small groups now. If you have additional questions that we did not get a chance to answer and you don't want to stay for small groups, just grab Caleb or I and give us your index card and we'll get those and send those out. If you want to receive that information, please make sure that you wrote your email address down at the sign-in sheets on your way out of the room. Social media, there's Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And then let me get your attention just for one more second when we break out. So Will and the development team are going to be right up here to talk about and answer questions in regard to that. For environmental, John and I are going to be right over here for questions. Genty's going to go back into the corner by the door to answer traffic questions. And Chris is going to come over here into the corner right by the HOMTV camera. So you can come up and ask individual questions you might have. But thank you very much for your time. We hope this was helpful. And we look forward to any further feedback or questions you might have. Thank you.